I saw The Northman, I tweeted, and I gotta tell you, I think I really nailed it. I think that's super accurate as to what you're getting into with this film. It's almost like, as a fan of Vikings, and who doesn't like Vikings, I decided to get in a time machine and visit that time period, only to be shocked and unnerved by what I discovered, and be like, let's get back in the time machine and get out of here. Like, before this movie, I'd seen the 1958 movie, The Vikings, which was cutting edge for its time, the Norway Pavilion at Epcot, and stuff like How to Train Your Dragon. So you can imagine this movie is quite the wake-up call, because I think we romanticize history, but writer-director Robert Eggers looks history in the eye with this movie unflinchingly. Oh, and it's tough for us not to flinch. It's brutal. I mean, my immediate reaction to this movie was, my God, I'm so glad I didn't live during this time period. As bad as things might seem now, this movie will make you appreciate where we are today. I mean, especially as a woman, I was like, wow, so life is just making babies and probably getting raped? I mean, it was like, it's still hard to process. But that's intentional. I think that emotional shock, I think Eggers does that intentionally, and it's very powerful. It's one of the most interesting things about this movie, actually. You know, it's like, oh, would you like to live during a different time period? Okay, let's try it. And you're like, holy crap. Like, whenever they do time travel movies, it usually works out okay, and people have funny encounters. But boy, this is, I think, what it would be really like. And I guess the fact that I feel this movie actually transported me to Viking times is a pretty good recommendation for it, right? And then also, once you get over that initial shock and you step back and you're like, okay, I'm not actually living in that time period. Let's look at this as a story, as a work of art, and what it's trying to say. And you realize this was a time period, like so many time periods until recently, when you think of the span of history, that life was very bleak and very short, and the world oh so small. You really only knew your little corner of it. So this is how people coped with that, which makes the movie fascinating. There's no entertainment. There's no, you speak to very few other people. You have very few things you're exposed to. It's a very short and limited life cycle. So what did people do to fill that time? And they were pretty creative, I have to say. But it's just, you have to think of that when you're watching the movie, because a lot of times you're just like, what are you guys doing? This is crazy. And the base cruelty of humanity, when there's no civilization to keep that cruelty at bay, and even then, it still seeps through, as we see. But this is, I think that too often parts of the world, look down at other parts, and they're like, oh, I can't believe you guys did that. And you're like, you should look at your own history, because this is like really bad, and America is just as guilty of that, I think. But here, this really explores how slavery was a big part of the Viking economy, just like the American South. And that's a big part of the story here, slaves and how they're treated. And so after like this movie and Midsommar by Ari Aster, who he also really greatly researched the tribes of Sweden, I mean, like, you'll never think of Northern Europe the same. It's like, wow, like, talk about just above and beyond for cruelty. It's just incredible. So yeah, I wouldn't describe The Northman as like a fun movie. This isn't like a fun Friday night at the movies, but it's an incredible visceral history lesson that will really stick with you. And if you like movies like Braveheart and Spartacus, which is the same movie basically, it's funny, if you watch those movies back to back, you can see that Mel Gibson really studied Spartacus. Those are like little children's books compared to the reality. And, it's interesting to see. And I guess, this is kind of also cut from the same cloth as well as those two movies. So to watch that evolution of truth and entertainment in the stories we tell, which is partially due to the world opening up and new voices coming in, is really cool. So you can see, I mean, I like stuff about this movie quite a bit, even though I wouldn't call it a fun movie. Now get this. This is also fascinating. The whole movie, Alexander's character is just obsessed with legacy. Because again, life is so short, so you focus on your family line. That's a big part of the film. And I, as a modern person, was like, hey, just live your life, man. Forget all this. Nobody's going to remember it. But I looked it up after. I was looking into the movie because, I was like, how historically accurate is this? So I was looking it up, and I was surprised to discover that Skarsgard is playing a real person in history, Prince Amleth, whose story actually inspired Shakespeare's Hamlet, so it did matter. I was like, wow, guy, you were right. So that was really interesting to me and made me look at the movie with a different perspective. So if I can help you with that going in, I think you'll appreciate the film more than I did when I was watching it. And on that note, I think Eggers and his collaborator, Sion, who has spent most of his career working with Bjork, more on Bjork in a moment, she has a cameo here, they really add an element of Shakespeare to this movie as well, which you really need to realize to understand and appreciate the film. You have to be like, because you might be like, this movie's weird. You have to be like, it's Shakespearean. Now I get it. The Northman really does play like Shakespeare meets a Viking myth meets the History Channel brought to life in a mainstream movie. That's crazy. That takes it all very, very seriously. Like, Eggers is not, I don't even know if he's trying to entertain. I think he's trying to educate and to transport you to this real place and time, which is cool. And I guess it's kind of, this is such dark stuff. Should you find it entertaining? So, I like it. It's like this movie belongs in a museum. It's really cool in that regard. The visuals also are stunning. So if you're at all interested in seeing this movie, you really need to see it in theaters, and I would recommend a premium screen. I don't know about IMAX because the screen might be too big to take it in, although it is life, right? But I think Dolby would be really great for this, or at least a big screen. It's just really cool visually and with the sound too. It's just a cool movie. And there's a long take. Of course there's a long take. Every filmmaker's Mount Everest these days, but Eggers nails it. It's done really well. It's a kick-ass long take. When you're watching it, you're like, this is a cool long take. Alexander Skarsgard is a beast in this film, as you can see from that shot. I wouldn't say he does anything new here from his previous work, which has always been excellent. Everybody, I think, respects Alexander Skarsgard, and we all wonder why he's not a bigger star. He's very talented. But boy, here he is a Viking, all right, from his striking physicality, which is a very big part of that. He played Tarzan as well. He has said that his physicality has hurt him as a serious actor. I don't know about that. I think he's not a particularly serious actor because he's not built a brand on that. He's been kind of like all over the place, which I think has delighted us as a fandom, but I don't know how much has built his brand. But anyway, he not only has that physicality, but he truly becomes this character heart and soul. It's weird seeing Ethan Hawke here because, of course, we're simultaneously watching him on Moon Knight right now, but he's pretty good. But it's also weird to see Nicole Kidman going from playing Alexander Skarsgard's wife in Big Little Lies to his mother here, but that's unfortunately Hollywood for you. I was like, come on, Hollywood, are you kidding me with this? Anya Taylor Joy is always a delight, and of course her big break was with Eggers' The Witch. And she has an amazing screen presence as always, but she's playing the typical love interest role here, but she gives it her all. She gives it her all. Everyone in this cast is 1,000% committed, which is really important and makes a difference. Bjork has one scene, as I said, totally knocks it out of the park, but she's a good actress. She made Dancer in the Dark like 20 years ago. People also talk about a visceral reaction to that movie. And I don't know why it didn't go further for her with her career. She's a good actress, and she has like a crazy role here, but she makes it believable. And Claes Bang, who was great as Stephen Moffat's Dracula. Remember, Moffat tried to do for Dracula what he did for Sherlock Holmes? Didn't work out. But Bang was great there. And he's really, really good here too. If that didn't bring him over to Hollywood, I think hopefully this will. He's fantastic. He ends up really holding his own against Alexander Skarsgård, acting-wise and physically, which is hard to do. They have this tasteful nude battle, like done in a lava pit, with spears and swords and stuff, and you would swear you were looking at the side of like an ancient vase. It's like really cool how they did that. I was, again, you're watching it, you're like, what are we doing here? Why? This seems pointless to me. Like, in the grand scheme of things, why, guys? Why? But then you're also like, but this was life back then, and we can see that reflected in what's left over, what has survived from the artifacts to the legend. And so that's really interesting. So again, I can't say, I mean, I guess you might say I did enjoy The Northman to hear me talk about it, but when I was watching it, I was more like, holy crap. But, you know, in retrospect, it's stuck with me. I'm glad I saw it, and I would recommend you see it as well, again, in theaters, in a premium format, if possible. So that's my review of The Northman. Share your thoughts down below. I'm very curious to see how it does commercially. I mean, it's Eggers' most commercial film to date, but it's still an Eggers movie. So share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.